Gary, let me ask you, and we've talked about all sorts of things and talked with so many different people over the last few months because of the pandemic shutdown stuff. But, we have Christians that got arrested for serving God rather than men, in many of people's opinions. But there were Christians who, they were cited and arrested at Easter time because they had parking lot services, socially distant in their own vehicles. In some cases, spike strips were put down. Pastors were arrested. Parishioners were cited. We've seen groups out in California like Grace Community Church and different ones that have been told, even though they've won some levels of court cases, you're not allowed to use your building. And it seems like all along the way, there are other Christians, and maybe we should call them the woke, groups or woke Christians, I don't know, but saying to guys like David Benham, oh, well, don't go out there and stand in front of the abortion clinic then if you might get in trouble. Or saying to Gabe, well, don't go out and sing in public. Don't go making a fuss like this. You can't sing with a mask on. I mean, really, I don't know if you've tried it, but it's like chewing gum and blowing bubbles with a mask on. It doesn't work. Or don't meet in your church. Just go online. Come on. What's wrong with you? Gary, I wonder if this is, as Gabe told the police chief there in Moscow, I wonder if this is a Daniel moment or maybe a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego moment for many Christians and for many pastors and churches, where if we were in their shoes, in the Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, for example, and the music was playing, if all these people would have said, just bow your knee. You don't really have to worship the statue. Just bow down. Come on. Don't raise a fuss. Don't get arrested. Don't get thrown into the furnace. I wonder what you think about that, Gary, as a pastor in this climate.
Well, I would simply add to what you say in the fact that this is not a time for many pastors or churches or Christians to stand up like Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is the time for all pastors, churches, and Christians to stand up, and it's the time for pastors to lead. That's what we are to do. I know we've tried to do that here on Stand in the Gap. We've done it through APN, but it's time for all pastors to stand up and to speak the truth. I would encourage every pastor under the sound of our voices today to spend some time on 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 1 through 8, where it talks about what we are to do as pastors. And there are 10 components in there that every pastor is to fulfill in his ministry. And then in Acts chapter 5 and verse 29, we are told that we ought to obey God rather than man. And here's the point, Isaac. As pastors, we need to understand what our commission is. The church is the pillar and the ground of the truth. 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 15. Pastors are to understand the truth and to proclaim the truth and not to back down from the truth, whether it's in teaching or standing out in the pulpit or out in the public square. And I think that this is a time where pastoral leadership must stand up and go forward. God has put pastors in communities to be the spiritual leadership, indeed, to be the spiritual authority based upon biblical truth. And we must be willing to do that at all cost or at any cost if we are going to be faithful under the calling that God has given us. This is not a time for pastors to succumb to some kind of a lawless ordinance that has been given by some mayor, governor, or anybody else. But it's important that we understand the truth and that we make certain that in whatever we do, whatever we say, we are not being pushed back from being the witness in the community and the representative of Jesus Christ that God would have us to be.